So today I'm going to be talking about the final amendment in the trio of amendments that followed the Civil War. Now, like I said, like with the 14th one and the 13th one for that matter, despite Lincoln being the starting point, he did oversee and personally sign the 13th Amendment, but he didn't get to see it get into effect, and he definitely didn't see the signing of the 14th and the 15th Amendment, but he was a starting point. Anyway, so 15th Amendment. Let's just go through the 13th and the 14th again because you kind of need to understand all of them. So the 13th, what it really did was just make slavery illegal and unconstitutional and really set people like black people free. Then the 14th Amendment, what it really did was, like I said last video, give them a kind of green card. So grant them citizenship. And what the 15th Amendment did, which is probably the most important, I mean, all of them are important, of course, but the most significant social change, it gave them a vote. It wasn't perfect, like more on that later, but you can be not someone's property. You can be a citizen of a country, but if you don't vote, you don't have the potential to, make change. So, I personally think that of all three of them, the 15th is the one that really influenced most later on. Although, this was passed in 1870 and enacted in 1870, and the African American vote wasn't really consolidated until 1960, 100 years, which is really horrible, but the thing is, it got started in 1870, and considering this was only 5 years after the end of the Civil War, not too bad. Still, you should have had a vote in the beginning. And by it gave them a vote, I only mean black males. Women they definitely did not have a vote at this point. Definitely didn't. So if you were a woman, and especially if you were a black woman, you were screwed. That's nothing new. Sadly, it's really nothing new. And the 15th Amendment, yeah, it gave them black male African Americans, it gave them the right to vote, but it wasn't really accepted. So it was just kind of the start of the struggle rather than the end. And this was actually seen as, by conservatives at the time, oh my god, we're giving these people the right to vote? Oh, the country's gonna crap. But Republicans, liberal Republicans, abolitionists, they thought, hey, we did it. We successfully reintroduced these people into society. Of course, this wasn't true. So, during the 1880s, some people actually took office in political positions, which is quite, an important step considering 20 years before they were literally fighting for a master, or not even fighting, but like serving a master, which is quite, However, just 10 years later, in the 1890s, things took a turn for the worst. Because despite white supremacy being constant throughout history, it really became accentuated. And one thing that, when I studied this a few years ago, they had literally literacy tests to get into the country. Yeah. To get into the country, to vote, to whatever. Let's say for a second, I'm just going to leave this here. let's just say for a second, you are a former slave. You were born, uh, in, you were the child of a slave, and for the first years of your life, you were a slave. And you are freed under the 13th Amendment and finally granted citizenship by the 14th Amendment. Then you get into the 1890s. And by this time, you're fully of age and you go to vote for the next election. But in order for you to be able to vote, you need to pass a literacy test. Problem is, because you were raised as a slave, you weren't given the privilege, or the right, but at the time, seen as a privilege, to, for education, you wouldn't be able to access education. So you wouldn't be able to read. So you wouldn't pass. So yeah, you could vote, but you really couldn't. Unless you were educated, which was quite uncommon considering, they came from slavery and they weren't granted access to education. Also, if your family hadn't voted in the 1860s, you couldn't vote later on. Problem is, how could your family vote in the 1860s if black people couldn't vote in the 1860s? And on top of that, if your family voted in the 1860s, for some reason, a miracle, and you can read, then you still don't get a vote. So yeah, black people were giving the right to vote. But they had to jump through all types of barriers just to be able to do so. And actual legislation, not national, but state legislation, especially in the South, the Bible Belt, and the country states in the Confederacy, they had anti-African American laws and things written into their Constitution. It's quite ridiculous. What didn't help is the famous 1896 Supreme Court case, Plessy v. Ferguson. This case, if you know literally anything about this, is about segregation. And the outcome was the whole separate but equal. Now, on paper, that sounds not too bad, right? Yeah, you can't mix. You have to be segregated. But it's the same life, You're equal, but you're separated. It's not too bad, right? I mean, the idea itself is horrible. Why shouldn't white people mix with black people, It's absolutely ridiculous, but it's not too bad. I mean, separated, right? Thing is, for some reason, African Americans had poor quality of life. They were offered poorer houses. The drinking fountains were for equality, if they were even working. Separate seating in the worst places, separate lines. They were ignored. So yeah, separate but equal, right? And then the whole Jim Crow laws. And, well, it obviously started, resistance. The NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, National Urban League, and obviously really important people like Philip Randolph, Booker T. Washington, W.E. Du Bois. Really, really important people. And then you have, so that was that for the 15th Amendment. And then in the 60s and 70s under Johnson, he passed legislation. Well, he urged Congress on the 15th of March, 1965. 100 years from the signing of the 13th, from the, the signing, but the end of Civil War and the passing of the 13th Amendment, that he would make laws that, when I quote, which will make it impossible to thwart the 15th Amendment. And he also said that we cannot have government for all the people until we first make certain it is government of and by all the people, which is actually one of the best things Johnson said. He had several voting rights acts in 1965, 1970, 1975, 1982, and they kind of ensured black people, not only black males, but also women could vote. And all because of the 15th Amendment. But yeah, that's it. I mean, that's the end. There's obviously more amendments, but it's the 13th, 14th, and 15th, which came from the Civil War, and the 13th summarized, freed the slaves, 14th made them citizens, and 15th allowed them to vote. Of course, none of them were completely, they were too good to be true, Yeah, they were freed, but only as punishment. They could still be enslaved as punishment for a crime. Yes, they were granted citizenship, but it wasn't really engraved with the Bill of Rights. It didn't really apply. And the 15th, well, yeah, you can vote, but only if you're a male, only if you can read, and if you can read, but pass a certain quality, pass a test, or have people who vote in your family despite not being able to vote before. And yeah, I'm gonna leave it there because there's not much else to say. So that was the 15th Amendment. I hope you liked it. I hope you found it interesting, and yeah, thank you for watching. Bye.